You know, down on the border between the US and Mexico, something really amazing happens with language. English and Spanish don't just live side by side, they actually mix together, creating these totally new and vibrant ways of talking. So, how are these unique voices finally getting the spotlight they deserve? Let's get into it.
So, have you ever heard someone use the word parquear? It's a perfect example of what we're talking about. You take the English verb to park and you give it a classic Spanish ending. Boom! It fits right into Spanish grammar. It's a word that was literally born from the reality of living in a bilingual world.
And here's another one you'll hear all the time, trucka. It comes, as you can probably guess, from the English word truck. Now, for millions of people, these aren't just made-up words. This is their natural, everyday vocabulary. It just reflects the world they live in. But for a really long time, this was the big question. A lot of people, even the folks who spoke this way, were taught to think that mixing languages was just incorrect, that it was some kind of impure Spanish. But is that really the case? Well, that whole way of thinking is finally starting to change. Okay, so let's picture the US-Mexico border. It's this incredible place where two cultures in two languages are in a constant state of conversation. Spanish isn't just a language that's spoken there. It's lived, it's breathed, and it's always evolving because of its daily contact with English. And for decades, these blended forms of language were pretty much dismissed. The academic world and society in general really pushed this idea of a standard or pure Spanish. And what that meant was that these border varieties were often seen as less than, as somehow inferior. It created this sort of linguistic discrimination against the very communities that spoke them.
And that led to a really serious problem. It wasn't just that these ways of speaking were misunderstood. The actual recordings, the proof of this language, were being lost. These priceless collections of voices were literally vanishing, almost as fast as they were being recorded.
This really gets at a huge shift in how research is done. See, the old way was a researcher would go out, collect a ton of interviews, but that data would stay on their personal computer, and when they retired, poof, it was gone. But now, this movement called open science is changing all of that. The whole point is to preserve and share data so that these voices are never, ever lost again. So how in the world do you save a voice? Well, the answer is in two really groundbreaking projects. They're basically building permanent digital homes for the real, everyday language of the border, turning these fleeting conversations into archives that will last forever. The two projects are CESA, which is based in southern Arizona, and Cobiva, down in South Texas. They're focused on different parts of the border, but their mission is exactly the same. Build a massive collection of interviews to document, share, and protect the incredible linguistic richness of these communities. The easiest way to think about it is this. They're building digital libraries. But instead of books on the shelves, you have audio recordings and transcripts of real conversations with people from the community. And with permission, anyone can come and check out a voice to study and understand it better. Now, one of the absolute coolest parts of all this is how the work actually gets done. A lot of this super important research is being carried out by university students. They get trained to go out into their own communities and become frontline language researchers themselves. And they do this with something called a sociolinguistic interview. Honestly, it's just a casual, comfortable chat. The whole idea is to get people talking about their lives, their stories, their experiences, because that's when you capture how people really talk every day. So here's how the process breaks down. The students go out and do the interviews. Then they transcribe all the audio. After that, they carefully make all the data anonymous to protect everyone's privacy. And then comes the fun part. They get to analyze the language patterns and share what they've discovered, completing the entire cycle of scientific research. So, what's the result of all this hard work? Well, the impact is huge, and not just for the academic world, but for the students and the communities themselves. It's all about what happens when a community's voice is finally treated like it's valuable. The number of students getting involved is just incredible. In the Kobe Viva project alone, more than 100 students have signed on as interns. They're gaining real hands-on research experience that connects them directly to their own heritage. And the work they're doing is reaching a global audience. Almost 500 researchers, teachers, and community members from all over the planet have gotten access to the Cobiva data. So these voices from South Texas are now helping to inform language studies in places like Spain, Brazil, and Canada. And the academic output speaks for itself. Research from the CESA project has led to dozens of journal articles, dissertations, and conference presentations.
It's all pushing forward our scientific understanding of how language works.
But, maybe the most powerful impact isn't something you can measure with a number. This quote from a student who participated really says it all. They said that seeing the language they grew up with taken seriously in a formal study made them feel validated. It proved that their way of speaking truly matters.
Because in the end, that's what this is all about. Preserving these voices isn't just some academic exercise to collect data. It's an act of validation. It's sending a message to an entire community that their language, their identity, and their experiences are absolutely worthy of being documented and preserved.
Now, this explainer is based on a really detailed research article called Sharing and Preserving Sociolinguistic Corpora on the US-Mexico Border. If you want to get into all the specifics, you can find the full paper in the journal Cuadernos de Lingüística.
And all of this leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. These projects are saving the voices of the US-Mexico borderlands. But what about in your own community? What other voices out there deserve to be heard, to be documented, and to be preserved for the future?